Oh.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, I am going to share my screen because I love this picture you sent me. Don't look at my messy screen. My computer has slowed down considerably because I have so many documents open on it, you know. My goodness. Anyways, this is Vicky Grierson. She contacted me, and lo and behold, we were both at Canador, and at the time, and I'm really excited to have her on board. And Vicky, I'm going to ask you again in advance that maybe to have you back in September because that's usually
Yeah.
when we have our everybody's keen and ready to go.
Yeah, for sure.
There's quite a few of our members that have taken up pickleball all of a sudden. And I started thinking about you as a physiotherapist, and I thought, oh, they need to know a little bit more about strength and stretch and assuming a sport when your body isn't ready for it, you know,
Yes.
or not, you know. So Vicky graduated from the University of Western in 1994. She's been working in sport and fitness for quite a while, 29 years as a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
And she had, what was the name of your organization? Fit for Sport, of course, all kinds of credentials. And she believes in the power of movement as medicine. And so, man, we're all on the same page here. We just don't have your expertise. So oops. I don't know why that's doing that. That's all I'm going to say, Vicky, because I think we should get started.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna just let me get set up
sharing.
to share my
People are
screen.
still
I have a slide deck. So the way my MacBook works, when I share my slide deck, I can't see. So if somebody raises a hand or has a question, I can't see you. I don't know why.
I'll be your Vanna. I'll be Vanna.
Excellent.
And
Right.
you can share screen whenever you're ready.
Okay. So it should share desktop. Yeah, just give me a sec here. Get out of that for a sec. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so we're going to share desktop too.
You're not on. Oh, yeah, there you go. We're good. Perfect.
Yeah, you can see it. Okay, and let me just play. Ah, there we go.
Oh, I love it already.
Right? Do you like my Bitmoji?
Yes, I do. Looks like that's good.
Okay, just give me a sec. I just got to adjust something on this other screen. Can I get rid of that? Ah, there we go. Okay. So thanks for joining me. And hopefully this is my first of many talks with Living Inside Out. So I understand your theme this spring is about recovery, and what a better way to recover than great quality sleep. So I find sleep very interesting. It's a topic I've discussed with my clients as a physiotherapist often, because I do believe it's everything when somebody's healing from surgery and injury. But until I really did the research to try to deal with my own sleep problems, I hadn't really realized how good quality sleep positively impacts our health in many more ways than just recovery. Just give me a sec here. Okay, so I've already been introduced, as you know, so I've been a physiotherapist for far longer than I care to admit. My other credentials as well as a physiotherapist, I am a strength and conditioning coach. And I'm also hold certifications as a Pilates instructor and a health and wellness coach. So as many of you heard, I'm fairly well to North Bay, just moving here last August to teach at Canador College. Things I like to do, I love to weight lift. I love getting my cardio outdoors, which is going to be amazing in this area. So if I can get out hiking, I've taken up kayaking, and we're hoping to build some trails through a forest and do a bit of mountain biking. And I've just recently joined the Symmetrics team. So I know some of you be familiar with that clinic. And as well, next year I'll be teaching part-time in the OTA, PTA, and the Strength and Sport Conditioning program at Canadore.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a busy girl. So we're going to start with getting to understand what sleep is. And when I'm educating my patients, I find that they will buy into what we're doing if they understand the why. So I'm a big believer in educating as to the why. So there's a great definition for sleep that was actually developed quite a long time ago. And it's a highly organized physiological behavior during which there are times, and this surprised me, when our brains are intensely active. And when I think about sleep, I don't think about my brain being intensely active, that it has a specific purposes that affect our daily function and physical and mental health. So there is a continually growing body of scientific research that is showing us more and more how important sleep is to every aspect of our health, as well as how a lack of good sleep can result in increased risk of many health issues. Okay, so what does sleep actually do? So first of all, it helps enrich our ability to learn and memorize. So super important. When I think about when I was in university, like sleep was low on the totem pole. It's amazing I passed. So super important to learning and memorizing, and also making logical decisions and choices. REM sleep, or that dream sleep, it helps us to recalibrate our emotional brain circuits. And that leads to reducing the emotionality in our social and psychological challenges the following day. So a really interesting fact that I picked up I don't know if any of you listen to the Huberman Lab podcast. No. Love this guy, super scientific. There's actually evidence emerging that some of the emotionality issues that many of us experience during perimenopause and menopause is actually linked to a lack of this REM sleep because of the sleep disturbances that we experience from hot flashes and hormonal fluctuations. So no surprise there. So that REM sleep also helps to dampen painful memories, and it does so by inhibiting the stress hormones during REM sleep. Helps us to take past and present knowledge and inspire creativity. In the body, it enables us to restock our immune system, super important right now. It helps fine-tune the insulin in our circulating blood glucose balance. It helps to regulate our appetite, and it helps us to maintain a healthy gut biome, which we're learning more and more is important. And also helps to maintain the fitness of our cardiovascular system. So it helps lower our blood pressure and helps maintain that heart health. So I read this awesome quote, and I wish I could find it, but it basically said that if we advertised all of the benefits of sleep as a drug, that drug would be flying off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what drives our sleep? And this is where the science has really evolved. So the first fact that it drives our sleep are signals from we have an internal clock, and it's an actual physiological body part. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus for anybody that's interested. So this not only helps us to determine our drive to sleep or be awake, but it also will determine some of our other time preferences. Things that you notice we're always hungry at the same time of day.
Yeah.
Our core body temperature, and it also will regulate our metabolic rate and the release of our hormones. So the really interesting feature about this internal clock is that it functions regardless of exposure to light or dark. So they did this kind of cruel scientific study where they put 2 subjects in complete darkness for 32 days. And those subjects still experienced a very predictable pattern of wakefulness, about 15 hours, and sleep, about 9 hours. What was super interesting is that that repeating daily cycle was not a precise 24-hour cycle. It was actually consistently and reliably longer than 24 hours. So they have now determined the average human cycle with the absence of light is about 24 hours and 15 minutes. So what calibrates this to a perfect 24-hour clock is the exposure to light, as well as some influence from cues such as meals or exercise or temperature fluctuation in the environment. So that light works by melatonin. So you've all heard of melatonin before. Melatonin will be released with the cue of diminishing light. And this gives us the signal for when it's time to sleep. And it provides that signal just to start sleep. It actually doesn't generate sleep. Then once you're asleep, that melatonin decreases slowly. And then with sunlight, it stimulates the shutoff of its release completely. So the second factor that determines the desire to sleep or be awake is something called sleep pressure. And this is driven chemically. So from the time you wake up in the morning, there's a gradual buildup of a chemical called adenosine in the brain. And adenosine, as it builds up, increases sleep pressure or that desire to sleep by concurrently turning down the wake-promoting regions of the brain and activating the sleep-inducing regions. So just as an aside, the way coffee works, it works by binding to the receptors that adenosine is supposed to bind to. And then it blocks the effect of adenosine until it wears off. And then adenosine comes crashing back to the sites. And that's what can cause what's called a caffeine crash. So in theory, these 2 factors should lead to a sleep cycle that looks something like this. So sleep phases lasting about 90 to 110 minutes, with the earlier portion of your sleep time dedicated to, if you look at the start of this chart, you see how there's a wider time of the stage 3 and 4 sleep. Okay, so that deeper sleep. And then as we progress through the cycles through the night, we spend less time in that deeper sleep and more time up into those lighter stages of sleep and REM sleep. This is what a normal cycle should look like. So there is some variation of normal. So just a quick, and I can't see Harriet, so you have to maybe let me know who raises their hand.
No one's raised their hand yet.
Okay, so we're gonna see how many of us are night owls. You're gonna put your hand up if you're night owls.
Any night owls?
Any night owls?
No night owls.
No night owls. Okay, we're gonna talk about that. And then how many are morning larks? I am. All of us?
I guess. I look that way.
Okay, anybody in between?
I don't see any hands yet.
Okay. All right. So for those of us that have partners, and you may have to go back a little bit because it does change as we age, and we're going to talk about that. How many of us have a partner that's the opposite of us? So I'm a morning lark. My husband is a complete night owl. How many of us have opposite partners? Nobody?
Not me.
Oh, interesting.
Liz is a night owl. Okay, we got one night owl. That's
a night owl. Okay. So the exact peak and trough times for sleep and wake they're going to naturally vary from person to person. So a lot of my reading comes from sleep researcher and expert Matthew Walker. He writes a great book called Why We Sleep. If you like science, this is a great book. If you don't like science, it'll put you to sleep. So he believes that we fall into one of three chronotypes. 40% of the adult population are going to be morning larks. And so we experience our peak wakefulness quite early in the day and experience sleepiness early at night. 30% of the adult population are night owls. So they naturally prefer to go to bed quite late and wake up quite late in the morning or early afternoon. So an interesting fact, and anybody that has grown children is going to know this. So if children transition to teenagehood, their clocks actually naturally shift to the night owl types until their mid-20s, and then they'll gradually shift to what their natural adult type is. So I have a daughter, she's 24 now. She is a complete night owl. So I was the only early bird in her household. The remaining 30% of us are going to be somewhere in between with a slight leaning towards the night owl. So there's a really cool theory as to why we have different preferences. And they think that it's because when we lived as tribes and there was dangers of predators and other tribes lurking around, it didn't make sense for us to all be asleep at the same time. Makes sense. Another interesting aspect of the different chronotypes is that quite often the opposites will attract as partners. So it's theorized that this better enables child rearing and protection of the family. Okay, so here we are. Many of us, myself included at times, we're struggling to achieve adequate sleep. So on the top right, those are Health Canada's recommendations for sleep. And then below, I talk about the reality. So 1 in 4 children are not meeting the recommended sleep. And as a physiotherapist, I see this. It's quite frightening. Canadian teenagers. So I worked mostly with youth athletes. Canadian teenagers averaging 6.5 to 7.5 hours a night. My athletes, especially when they're growing, they can need up to 10 to 12. 1 in 4 adults in that age 18 to 35, and then again 65 to 95 are not meeting sleep. And then when we get into that age 35 to 64, there's a third that are not meeting their sleep.
Wow.
So why? Let's talk about what normal sleep should be. So we know how much we should get. Otherwise, there's other things to include like quality, sleep latency. So the first thing is what we call sleep latency, and that's how much time it takes to fall asleep. So normal is considered between 10 and 20 minutes to fall asleep. You're falling asleep faster than that, you're probably short on sleep. If it's taking you longer to fall asleep, then that becomes an issue. Second is what we call our sleep efficiency. So that is how much time you're actually spending asleep, expressed as a ratio to how much time you're laying in bed. And that should be, we should be at sleep at least 90% of that time or better. As well, how many times a night we wake up. So it's considered normal to wake up about 1 to 2 times a night for a few minutes, at least less than 20 minutes. If you're waking up more than that during the night, and I'm not just one night a week or once in a while, if you're doing that several days per week, or you're waking up for longer than 20 minutes, then it may be something that needs to be addressed. You should be awaking feeling refreshed, feeling like you have lots of energy during the day, feeling in a good mood, and you feel clear-headed. So what are the symptoms of poor sleep? So having trouble getting up in the morning, struggling to focus, irritability, depression, anxiety, sleepiness during the day or needing to schedule daytime naps, or you're sleeping much longer or later on unstructured days. So inefficient sleep becomes difficult to detect because those symptoms of poor sleep can also be caused by a lot of other factors, such as lack of physical activity or poor diet or dehydration. So why are we not sleeping well? So there's several reasons. And the first one we're going to talk about is aging. So that internal clock, that suprachiasmatic nucleus that I talked about, it ages just along with the rest of us. And as it does, its function will deteriorate. And what this leads to is it leads to a disruption of our circadian clock. And then this is exacerbated if we don't get out into the sunlight to recalibrate that clock as it should. As well, our hormone production changes as we age. So we have those changes in our estrogen and progesterone, which control a lot more than we used to think. And we also have reduced production of melatonin. As we get older, we start to experience an increase in the number and severity of our health conditions. The big thing I deal with is pain from arthritis and how that disrupts sleep. Things like diabetes, heart disease, side effects of medications that we need to take, increasing incidence of sleep apnea, things like restless leg syndrome. So these become more common as we get older.
I think, is it possible that when I don't get enough sleep, I'm really sore? Like I do have some arthritis, but when I get a good sleep, I don't have as much, pain from arthritis.
Absolutely. All the magic happens when we sleep. All the repair, all like what it happens physically and in our brains during sleep is absolutely incredible. And yeah, absolutely. If you're not getting that time for your body to clean out the damaged tissue and get that repair tissue laid down, for sure, it absolutely will increase inflammation. Really interesting story with that. So my mom, when I was in physio school, went to a rheumatologist because she was experiencing all this soreness. And he diagnosed her with fibromyalgia, which we know is an inflammatory syndrome. So my mom was divorced at that time, so she had no sleep partner. So she, about 10 years later, got remarried. And her husband said to her, "Do you realize you stop breathing in your sleep?" So she's like, "Oh, that's not good." So she went to a sleep clinic, got diagnosed with sleep apnea. So she was having some pretty disrupted sleep, didn't even realize it. Anyway, she goes on a CPAP. Her fibromyalgia disappeared. And it's because she was finally getting good quality sleep. It's absolutely incredible.
Interesting.
I've had several patients say that to me. The way they feel after they've gone on their CPAP is game changer. So one of the other things that's going to affect it is our lack of exposure to natural light. And on the flip side of that, exposure to artificial light at the wrong time of day. So the artificial lights that we have right now, and in particular, these LED lights with that real blue that I'm sitting under right now, the real blue hue, this is relatively new for humans. So as humans, we're quite visual. A third of our brain is actually dedicated to visual processing. So back in the old days, before electricity, most of our activity was going to cease after sunset because we couldn't see anything. There was some extension with, the introduction of fire, but it didn't really significantly affect our sleep-wake cycles. So pre-artificial light, that loss of that full stream of daylight, and in particular, the blue that is present in morning and midday sunlight, that signaled the brake pedal on the melatonin to let go. And it allowed that melatonin to release, which was what helped to signal us to sleep. If we're exposed to artificial light, and in particular that blue light in the evening, our internal clock thinks it's still the middle of the day. And so it inhibits that release of the melatonin. I'll send you the link to this, Harriet. There's a video that's, I think it's a TED Talk by Sachin Panda. And if you want to read a good book, The circadian code is incredible. So he talks about how a healthy circadian habits affect our health and like in massive ways I hadn't even considered. So I can't do him justice, and he's got such a cool accent as well. So as he explains, we have these blue light sensing proteins that I'm a science geek, so it's called melanopsin. And these are present in the nerve cell of our eyes, and that these nerve cells are directly hardwired to our internal clock. So they are less sensitive to orange light, such as candlelight or firelight, and more sensitive to blue light, which is what helps to synchronize our internal clock. So you can see that if we're getting that artificial blue light in the evening, it's going to send a signal to our internal clock that it's not night. And as well, if we don't get outdoors in the morning to get that rich blue light, then it doesn't signal our internal clock what time of day it is. So this doesn't just affect our sleep, but he believes that it affects every organ and process in our body.
I can believe that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They just had a big thing on CBC about screens and how the eyes are being impacted. More people are nearsighted now than ever before, especially children. It's happening earlier and earlier, which is really interesting because I'm on the screen a lot, you know. And I have the glasses with the blue tinge.
Yes.
Which I'm not wearing right now, but I'm thinking that does have an impact on your health for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And your eyeballs, your
dry eye.
Yeah.
So you just brought that up. So spending time on those screens later in the day, so TVs and tablets and cell phones, is also thought to be a contributing factor. So a lot of the tech companies now have the night option where it goes more a warmer color. The last reading I've done into this, the jury's is still out on whether this actually can counteract the effect of artificial light. All right, caffeine. So as I said, caffeine works by basically binding to those receptors that adenosine, which helps to build that sleep pressure, are supposed to bind to. So we all process caffeine differently, and that's based on genetics. So I have to give myself a caffeine curfew. I can't even eat dark chocolate beyond 2 o'clock in the day. Whereas my husband could have a coffee right before bed and fall right to sleep. So it's important to be aware of that. All of us, there's an enzyme that breaks it down, and all of us are different in how we process it. So we just need to be aware of how we tolerate caffeine, and I give myself a caffeine curfew. Okay. Temperature. So our circadian rhythms are actually naturally coordinated with a fluctuation in our core body temperature, which begins to drop as we near our typical bedtime. And that is part of what helps signal us to sleep. And it reached its low point about 2 hours after we fall asleep. So this decrease in core body temperature, once it dips below a certain threshold, those cells are going to send messages back up to that internal clock, and then add to that the natural fading light. So this cooling of the core body temperature happens through our skin, our hands and our feet, and face in particular. So in nature, as that sunlight goes down, there's usually or should be a concurrent drop in the air temperature that happens with that loss of light. And that helps to facilitate that drop in our core temperature. However, we're living in an artificial environment most of the time. So those thermostats are actually controlling that temperature. So we no longer have that input from environmental temperature into our system. For those of us that have gone or are going through perimenopause and menopause, You can see how hot flashes really disrupt this temperature cycle, not to mention how it disrupts sleep when you're waking up in a pool of sweat. Alcohol, and this is an interesting one. I grew up with the I guess the old wise tale that if you were having trouble sleep, you got up and did a shot of whiskey or whatever they used to do. They've actually now found that for those of us that might enjoy a glass of wine on an evening or two a week, that it can actually lead to poor sleep in two ways. So first of all, it fragments sleep. So it causes brief awakenings through the night, even though you may not realize it. And it also represses that REM or that dream sleep. And it does it because one of the byproducts as it breaks down prevents the brain waves that would otherwise power this sleep. So again, going back to Matthew Walker, he feels that evidence is so strong that he recommends that hitting the pub in the morning is actually better than in the afternoon or evening. Not sure I would recommend that. Other things affecting our sleep. So we are actually the only organisms that prematurely and artificially terminate our sleep. So if we're able to wake up on our own, most of us would feel a lot better than being yanked out of sleep in the middle of one of those sleep cycles, as opposed to at the end of one when our bodies naturally are kind of coming out of that sleep. So interesting studies. So they've shown that participants that are artificially ripped from sleep will actually experience a spike of blood pressure and acceleration of their heart rate. And that's caused by a burst in activity in your fight or flight system. So any of us that are guilty of hitting the snooze button repeatedly, we're doing this to ourselves several times a morning. And then lastly, the other thing that's going to affect our sleep, and this is when I got really interested in sleep, is stress. I don't know how you guys were during COVID. I am a business owner, and I didn't sleep for the first 3 months of COVID. So stress obviously is going to really affect how we sleep. Okay, so now I've filled your brains with lots of science. We're going to do the take homes now. How can we best ensure we get the recommended amount of sleep, and then how we get the quality sleep we need for optimal health? And I'm going to summarize these at the end. So the first and most important recommendation is something called sleep hygiene, and that includes several components. The first, and this can be tough for people, is to establish and stick to a regular sleep schedule. If possible, align it with your natural clock as best you can, and even on weekends. So do we see the challenge with this? So for somebody like me who is a complete morning lark, I love being up with the sunrise, and I would be in bed at 8 o'clock at night if I could. On a weekend, socially, that doesn't jive. So it's really hard for some of us to stay on that regular schedule every night. So the recommendation is to try to stay as close as you can, and at least within an hour. So there's a lot of challenges with doing this for some people. So recommendation number 2, part of sleep hygiene, try to hack your neurosystem and use light to synchronize your circadian clock. One of the biggest recommendations out there right now is to try to view sunlight, particularly early in the day within the first couple of hours of sunrise. So that's not easy, especially not up here in the north when it's crazy cold in the morning. What I try to do, but I'm an early morning person, is I try to get outside for about 10 minutes as early in the day as I can. So I wake up around 5:30. I will try to get out with my coffee and just sit out and have my coffee for a bit when it's warm enough. In the winter, it gets light a little bit later. I try to go out and shovel the sidewalk or something just to get outside for 10 or 15 minutes. So the reason why it's important to get out really early, it's the angle at which that light hits the back of your eye that tells us what time of the day it is. And that sets up the whole cascade of what's supposed to happen to get us to sleep well at night. So it's actually quite important what we're doing first thing in the morning to affect our sleep that following night. So even if it's cloudy out, you're still getting those appropriate signals to your internal clock. So how long do you need to be out? So in my research, I've seen anything from 10 minutes to recommendations of up to an hour if you're having trouble sleeping. And I think it's going to depend on person to person and where you are. So I think it also is going to depend on the brightness of that sunlight. So is it affected by a cloud versus a super bright sunny day? There is some research on using, you've seen the sun lamps. There's limited research on it, on using that as a substitute. But I would think that if you're using artificial blue light and it can disrupt your signals later in the day, I would think using it early in the day would be of benefit. Other things. So you guys all know how important exercise is. That being said, vigorous exercise, if it's done too late in the day, will disrupt that sleep pressure and make it difficult to fall asleep. So it's recommended that if you do moderate to vigorous exercises, that you're doing that at least 2 to 3 hours prior to sleep. So myself, I used to play volleyball till 9 o'clock at night. I was wired for hours. I have to do my exercise first thing in the morning, whereas my daughter would go out and play hockey till 10 o'clock and fall asleep like that. You can do gentle exercise, and actually it's beneficial. Things like yoga or a nice walk or gentle Pilates are usually not going to wind you up and affect your sleep. As well, meal timing. So having those large meals late in the evening is going to disrupt sleep. And I think this is actually something that's been known for a while. A light snack if you need something. And then again, I'll give you the link to that video I talked about. He discusses this in detail. He explains how that timing of our exercise and timing of our eating actually really affects our circadian clock and therefore our sleep. So he goes so far as to recommend that we actually try to make sure that we're timing our meals and our exercise for around relatively consistent times of the day to really set our clock. Super important to sleep in complete darkness. And this is really hard. I was out in the country at my house in Bowmanville. And when we first moved in, it was so dark outside, you literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Wow. I slept like a baby. Then the 407 went in and it was lit up like you would not believe. And so I started having a little bit of trouble sleeping, and it took me a little bit to figure out what it was. Anyway, so you want to, it does impact sleep. You want to try to sleep in complete darkness. And I go so far I cover any digital clocks. I will even cover, like, you know how there's like that little green light on smoke detectors? I will cover it. I'm obsessed with it. So if you need, like some of us can't cover everything. I've used the slumber mask, blackout curtains. The challenge with those things is then you lose your early morning exposure, and that gradual increase of sunlight that's going to help stimulate natural waking. As well, you want to try to keep your bedroom at an optimal temperature. The recommended temperature would be about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which translates to 18 degrees Celsius. You get too much lower, so 55 or less, and that's going to be too cold. So the physiotherapist part of me is going to come out now. It's super important to make sure you have a good, supportive and comfortable mattress and pillow. When I say this to patients, one of the things I always talk to them about, especially with back and neck patients, what's your mattress like? What's your pillow like? Oh, mine's 20 years old. I need to replace it. They're expensive. This is my answer. You should be spending a third of your life in that bed. It is worth investing in making sure you have that comfort and support, especially when we understand what the impact of poor sleep is. So you want, for the reduction of the chance of snoring, we do want to be able to sleep on your side. I don't recommend stomach sleeping beyond a certain age, just because of the way it really turns that neck. Younger, they seem to be able to get around it. The other side of why we want to sleep on our side is we actually have this cleanup process that happens when we sleep. And it works through a system called the glymphatic system. So it helps to clean out, flush out all the metabolites in our brain and drains it back into our cleanup system, into our lymphatic system for cleanup. So if we're sleeping on our back and our head is up elevated on a pillow, then it doesn't allow for that clean out to happen. As far as your mattress, it should support you, but also fill in any of those gaps. So recommend a fairly firm mattress with a topper that's going to just sort of help fill in those curves. That pillow, when you're laying on your side, the height of the center of the pillow should reach from the side of your head to the side of your shoulders, should fill that in. And then there should be a little extra at that curve of your neck to support your neck in neutral. If you are going to sleep on your back, that pillow needs to be much thinner, okay, so that your head is not forced into that forward head posture. The other thing that we need to think about is breathability of the things that are on us. So the breathability of our pajamas or the bedding. I am particularly very sensitive. I can't wear anything with polyester in it. So I like linen or cotton sheets. Silk is breathable, cotton pajamas, anything that allows that natural flow of or exchange of temperature.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because, those are natural fibers.
Yep.
And that if you do go with those natural fibers, they're completely, they will biodegrade eventually, you know, not like
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about mattresses?
Yeah, for sure.
So what's your thought on foam mattresses? I would think you would.
Yeah, it's interesting. So so it becomes down to, yeah, you're talking about like the memory foam?
Yes.
Okay, memory foam?
I'm not sure. We're looking for a new mattress, and I read a lot about the foam mattresses, and I'm sort of not wanting one after I read the reviews.
Yeah, so I am not a fan of memory foam, to be perfectly honest, because it doesn't breathe.
Okay.
Maybe they've come out with something, but yeah, I find it in having slept in it myself. I slept in a bed that had it, and I found it left me in one spot, like I was just like encased in one spot. Everybody's different. I have some patients that like it. I had a latex foam mattress with a wool topper that I really liked. So the difference there is that wool is breathable and so is the latex. It's a natural fiber.
Okay, thanks.
And then you have your spring mattresses.
Yeah.
The other thing you have to consider is if you have a sleep partner. So what I found on that latex and wool mattress is I didn't feel him move. We're on a spring mattress right now, and he's quite restless. I will feel him move. So it's going to be a lot of factors. Definitely look into that breathability though.
I only feel hear my husband move when he leaves because I snore and he goes to the snore room.
Oh, yeah. There's another book I'll recommend. I'll talk about snoring. Okay. Other parts of sleep hygiene. So try to schedule some time to wind down and relax before bed. And even if it's only 10 minutes. So, doing some reading, listening to some relaxing music. If you could do a meditation, I like doing the moon salutation yoga flow. Knitting, I find knitting before bed is kind of like counting sheep. So making sure you're really scheduling some relaxation time before bed. As well, a warm bath will help relax you. But what it does is it actually, because the warm brings your blood flow to the skin, when you get out of the bed and you've got that cooler air temperature, it actually reflexively drops the core body temperature, and that will stimulate sleepiness. So you want to make sure you do that early enough before bed to allow that core body temperature to drop. If you're taking medication and you're having trouble sleeping, chat with your pharmacist, because a lot of them have side effects that you've not been told about, or there could be a combination of medication that's affecting it. I find pharmacists, hands down, the best resource to talk to about not just medication, but also natural supplements. So common medications that are going to disrupt sleep: blood pressure medications, beta blockers, corticosteroids, allergy medication. I've had that experience before. Some antidepressants, glucosamine and chondroitin, and then statins. Even natural supplements can negatively affect sleep. So personally, I can't take cold effects for more than 2 days in a row because you could scrape me off the ceiling with it. Makes me totally wired. If you do enjoy napping, and I am an infamous napper, love my midday naps.
Hands up. Who's an adult napper? I am.
I've been since my daughter was a baby. I had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So you do want to watch how late you take that nap. And there is strategy to napping. Matthew Walker, again, recommends no later than 3 p.m. Okay, so let's say you have taken all of these steps that are included in sleep hygiene, but it's still not working. What's your next step? So there is a technique out there called cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So after you've addressed all of those basic strategies I've just talked about, CBTI is going to add something called stimulus control, and this is something you could do yourself. So what this does is it ensures that you are using your bedroom for sleep and loving only. So no TV, no reading, no homework, no work in your bedroom, nothing else. It also includes that if you are laying awake in bed for any more than 20 minutes when you're either trying to fall asleep or in the middle of the night, you leave that bedroom. Don't turn any lights on or keep it very dim, but you're leaving that bedroom, because what you don't want to do is associate that room with the inability to sleep. Okay, so that is stimulus control. Super interesting. If that doesn't work, the next step would be something called sleep compression. And this is something that you would do under the guidance of a sleep therapist. This is not something I'd recommend you doing on your own. So we talked about that sleep efficiency. So how many minutes we're actually spending asleep as a ratio to how long we're spending in bed. And we should be asleep at least 90% of that time or better. So what sleep compression would do is gradually shift your bedtime later and your wake time earlier until you hit that ratio, and then gradually re-expand it. But again, you need to do that under the guidance of a sleep therapist. CBTI would also include things like relaxation strategies and cognitive restructuring cognitive restructuring strategies that are the basis of CBT. A great book that I read, Say Goodnight to Insomnia, is based on that, those strategies. Okay, so some other options that may be out there. I've worked with acupuncturists for years. I'm a huge believer in it. And I have a great naturopath in town that does acupuncture. So acupuncture is known to be helpful for some people for sleep. Other options, there's some sound research through some of the programs. There's a sleep hypnosis program by Reverie Health that was developed, I believe, at Stanford or Harvard, that I know some people have had good success with. And there's other pre-sleep guided meditations that would work. As far as supplements, this is a dicey area. So I don't know if you're aware, but supplements are not regulated. So I personally also always recommend that you consult with a qualified healthcare professional, such as a naturopath or a pharmacist, before you add supplements, particularly if you're on medication. I know melatonin is a very common one that people tend to use, but I'm finding that people are using it inappropriately. Melatonin is meant to just signal that it's time to sleep. It doesn't actually generate sleep. So it's good if you're changing time zones and you need that signal. But if you use it on a regular basis, it actually is completely going against using natural light.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Okay, so here's your takeaways. So establish your regular and your adequate time routine of waking up and going to bed, even on weekends. Take advantage of that power of light. So get out as early as you can and view that early morning sunlight, not through a window. You need to be outside, anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. If you can, on the flip side of that, viewing the sunset, I mean, how amazing is that? That's going to give you a signal that it's approaching your bedtime as well. Shut down those screens and dim the lights a minimum of 1 to 2 hours prior to bed. So when I just had my house built, I requested dimmers in all of my main rooms. Exercise. You guys know how important that is. But also make sure you're limiting your vigorous exercise so that you're not doing that 2 to 3 hours prior to bedtime. As well, try to do something relaxing before your bedtime. So that warm bath, meditations, yoga. Make sure you're finishing your large meals at least 2 to 3 hours prior to bedtime. Be aware of the effects of alcohol, what your medications may be doing, and set your caffeine curfew. Taking that warm bath 1 hour prior. Create your healthy sleeping environment. So make sure that bedroom is for sleep and love only. Get your temperature right. Get yourself comfortable. So making sure that mattress, pillow, your linens and pajamas. Sleep in your complete darkness. Get the electronics out. And lastly, try not to lose any sleep over it.
Wow. Can you stop share, please?
Yep. I'm just gonna, how do I unshare now? Oh, stop share. Yep. Yeah. Got it. There we go.
Wow. This was an excellent presentation.
We're going to have to stop watching TV 2 hours before bed.
Yeah.
And we can't even go in our bedrooms to read. We have to read out here.
Remember, you heard her, Joni. She said that's the love space.
Sleeping and loving only.
That doesn't happen in my space, but anyways, that's another story. I'm just going to stop.
It's
that on there.
Well, so when we had our house built, they said, okay, where do you want your TV wires to go? And I'm like, the living room. They're like, not in the bedroom. Like, no, let's not even put the temptation in there. Yeah. And I when I was living in residence, I didn't have any options of where to work. I had to work in my bedroom. So I really noticed a difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is very, very, and we've run out of time.
Yeah. I do have some time for if anybody has any questions.
Do you have any questions, everyone?
I have a question about time change. What's your thought on that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so one of the things that I actually forgot to mention is as we get older, we definitely have a harder time adapting to things like jet lag and the time changes. Yeah, and that changes as we age. I personally think the time change is the worst thing we can do to us. And I can't remember where I read it, whether it was in Matthew Walker's book or if it was something else. They actually likened the time change to jet lag, like that inability to adjust. I hate the time change so much that when I was running I had my own clinic in Bowmanville. I actually just changed the hours of my clinic with the time change. I didn't change my schedule at all. Yeah, no, it's awful for you, honestly. I personally, if I have the ability, I change my sleep schedule and don't change my technical, like, so if the time was, I was waking up at 5 o'clock before, then with the time change, I'll wake up at 6 o'clock instead. I don't alter my schedule.
Yeah, if you don't work or you're retired, you could have that option.
You do that, but yeah. So I mean, when I was working at my own clinic, I had that option. Working at Canadore, I didn't have that option. It really messed me up.
Any other questions? Well, okay, Vicki, we have to chat about fall because the information you've given us, I think it belongs to everybody. And I don't think this is about aging. It is about aging, but it's also very relevant to any age, I would say.
Well, and you know what? Just reading the statistics, and especially during COVID, just people are sleeping worse and worse and worse. And there's so many factors. And so I will send you a list of resources. Sachin Panda's book, just in that talk is like eye-opening. Like the things that we are artificially putting in our life, like these lights, these screens, street lights, noises. It's just not getting out into nature. It's just impacting us in ways that it's going to take us eons to realize what we're doing to ourselves. But at least we have some information, we can get started. And I can tell you right now, so I'm back out in the country in the 5 acres where you can't see your hand in front of your face, sleeping like a baby again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Vicki, my name's Carolyn Ward.
Hi.
I worked shift work for 27 years. Sorry, I started late on this. I've had 6 nights now. I've woken up probably every half hour, and I've been retired for 2 years. What can I do? It's continuous.
Yeah. So both my parents were RNs. They were shift workers. So there was an interesting study that they were trying to do with shift workers. They were trying to use the blue light goggles with them. Your best bet is to try synchronizing yourself with light, like try all those sleep hygiene things first. So, get yourself out, within an hour or two of sunrise, and I would get yourself out there as long as you can for that hour. And then again, making sure you're getting out at sunset, seeing that change in the angle of the sun, dim those lights in the house. So try to get the light signals corrected, and then use all those hygiene steps I talked about. If you are not sleeping still, then either get yourself assessed at a sleep clinic.
Okay.
Where are you with hormones? Is there a possibility that's impacting it?
With menopause?
I'm always hot. So I have now an air conditioner right on me. So,
yeah.
But I've always slept in cold rooms.
Yeah. So make sure your bedding is breathable. If you're wearing pajamas, make sure that's all breathable. And then so the options after that is like after all those basics I've talked about, you got sleep therapists. And if I don't know who's around, like, because I'm new to North Bay, I have zero clue of resources. There's a physio. She's licensed in Ontario, but she lives in BC as well, that does telehealth sleep hygiene or sleep therapy, that I can connect you up with. But you're also getting a sleep assessment because they're going to a sleep clinic. Quite often I find it doesn't give us the information we want, but that is an option as well. I wouldn't leave it. If you're covering those basic hygienes and you're not getting better within the month, I would reach out for further help.
Okay, sounds good. I had been sleeping well, but the last, again, 6 days, it's just, my body thinks it's supposed to be up on nights again. I don't know.
Yeah, I know it took my mom quite a while to readjust. Both my parents. Shift work is tough on the body.
I think that's a good point, because I think, and that I think I am included in that sometimes I want a quick fix, and it's not going to happen. It's got to be a steady pattern, to make sure I'm really going to try to implement some of those things.
And it's hard.
I'm not always good at it, because sometimes I cross the line and maybe I have a glass of wine late at night. If that happens, I'm not going to sleep. I know that.
Yeah.
I got to slap my own hand and say, don't.
Yeah, it's not easy to be disciplined. And I find for myself, because I mean, we go up to a cabin where everybody's very social and fairly late. Yeah. And if I hear my husband call me grandma one more time because I'm going to bed at 10, I'm going to bring his mat. That's just who I am. And I feel better when I stick to what's natural for me.
Yeah. I guess it's really tuning into your body and making some really significant changes. But even that sometimes doesn't work, right, Carolyn? So, because I know you walk your dog, you do all the things that you're supposed to do.
Oh, I've been to naturopaths. I've done. You tell me, everyone. Grandma says this. I've tried everything.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like if you've tried all those things, you've been to a naturopath, probably done acupuncture and things like that. I said, like, it actually surprised me how much impact it had. So if I said, if you've tried all those hygiene things, you need to reach out and get some extra assistance.
We have to stop, Vicki. We're 10 minutes over, but this has been extremely informative. Good. Very, very interesting. Your slide deck is awesome.
You know what? So I love doing slide decks, and
that's good.
And during this whole COVID thing, I'd been asked to deliver these educational webinars, and after teaching at Canadore for a year, I'm like fast at them. So
wonderful. So I am going to call you, and we'll talk about fall.
Yes,
because I would love to have you do this in person.
Okay. Yeah.
And a repeat, because we don't have enough people, our members who could really benefit. Like we are benefiting, but there's a whole slew of other people that could really benefit from this. And especially as we age. What do you think, everybody? Awesome. Thumbs up.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
I have the YouTube video. So this will be public. Are you okay with that, Vicki?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I'll send it in the email to you. Okay.
And I will, if I don't get those resources out to you in the next week, Harriet, just shoot me an email and remind me.
No worries. I send a weekly email to everyone. So I think that now they are watching the recordings and they're maybe sleeping in. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks.